Hawthorne Bay looked different at night, soft, glowing, almost unreal. Lanterns hung along the pier like floating orbs, swaying gently in the early spring wind. Music drifted across the boardwalk, violins, soft drums, laughter. It was the annual Lighthouse Art Festival, a night when the town celebrated hope, creativity, and all things beautiful. Maya Rowan didn't feel beautiful. She didn't feel hopeful. She felt like an exposed nerve. Her sketchbook slipped from the crook of her prosthetic arm, tumbling to the wooden planks with a soft thud. She froze. Hey, if you're still watching, that means you're loving the story. Go ahead and subscribe so you never miss the next one. A few pages fluttered loose. Charcoal drawings of faces she'd never see again, hands she could no longer draw the same way, details that once flowed effortlessly through fingertips she no longer had. People walked past without noticing, but Maya felt flames crawling up her neck. She bent forward, attempting to trap the edge of the sketchbook between her prosthetic forearms, awkwardly nudging it closer to her chest. Her metallic arm brushed the lantern light, glinting too brightly. Too visible. She hated that. The more she tried to clutch the sketchbook, the more it slipped. A small whimper escaped her, frustration, embarrassment, grief all tangled together. She inhaled sharply, preparing to gather herself and run before anyone could. "I've got it," a voice said softly, not loud, not pitying, just calm. A man crouched beside her, picking up the sketchbook with the kind of carefulness someone uses when touching something sacred. He brushed a bit of charcoal dust from the cover and held it out to her. Maya stiffened. He was looking directly at her face, not her arms. Most people couldn't manage that. "Thank you," she murmured, wishing the ground would open and swallow her. She tried to grip the book between her forearms again, subtly turning her prosthetics away. But the man didn't move, didn't rush her, didn't pretend not to see. He simply waited until she got the sketchbook secured. Then he smiled, a tired, lopsided, genuine smile. "You draw beautifully," he said. "I saw the portrait on the first page. The shading is incredible." Maya's breath hitched. Nobody was supposed to see that. Nobody was supposed to see her. She took a step back. "Please, I'd rather you didn't." "Sorry," he said immediately, hands raised as if warding off her panic. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to help." "It's fine," she blurted. "It's just my fault. I didn't want anyone to look." The man's expression softened, not with sympathy but something more complicated, something familiar. He looked like someone who knew how it felt to want to disappear. He extended a hand, not toward her prosthetics, but toward her personal space, giving her full control to accept or reject. "I'm Jonathan," he said. "Jonathan Hale." Maya hesitated, her heart hammered. Touch was intimate. Touch made vulnerability real. But he wasn't asking to touch her. He was offering a greeting, nothing more. A gesture of welcome, not intrusion. She dipped her head slightly. "Maya." He withdrew his hand respectfully. "Nice to meet you, Maya." Nothing in his tone changed. Not when she spoke, not when she moved. Not even when the lantern light fully revealed her prosthetic arms, sleek titanium frames ending just below the elbows with adaptive grips in place of hands. No shock, no awkward silence, no overcompensation. He simply took her in the same way people took in the ocean, an undeniable part of the scenery. Jonathan glanced toward the path leading up to the lighthouse. "They're about to light it," he said. "Best view is from the bluff if you want company or not. Either way is fine." Maya swallowed. Strangers rarely offered options. They offered conclusions, pity, advice, distance. But this man offered a choice. She should say no. She should leave before this became dangerous, before kindness unraveled her defenses. She began, but her voice caught. Because Jonathan wasn't waiting with expectation. He wasn't leaning in. He wasn't trying to convince her. He was simply there, and that scared her more than anything. "Actually," he said suddenly, looking past her shoulder, "I think you dropped one more page." Maya turned and froze. A single sheet of paper lay fluttering on the boardwalk. A drawing she swore she had packed away where no one could ever see it. A portrait of herself, broken, armless, drowning in darkness. Jonathan stepped toward it. Maya's heart stopped. What happens when Jonathan picks up the one drawing Maya never meant anyone to see? And what secret will it reveal about him? The lantern swayed above them as the wind picked up, rustling the edges of the loose sketch lying on the boardwalk. Maya's heart pounded so violently she felt dizzy. That drawing, the one she'd begged herself to destroy 100 times, was exposed, lying there like a confession she'd never meant to make. "Don't," she whispered, stepping forward instinctively. But Jonathan had already moved. He didn't lunge for it. He didn't snatch it up like a discovery. He approached it slowly, deliberately, as if afraid fast movements might frighten her. He crouched, picked up the paper with the gentle precision of someone handling a fragile memory, and stood. The drawing faced him for half a second before Maya could turn her prosthetic arm enough to take it. In that half-second, she braced herself, waiting for disgust, pity, or that awkward sympathy people wore when they thought they were being kind. But Jonathan didn't make a sound. He simply lifted his eyes to hers. Maya inhaled sharply. "Please don't look at that." Jonathan offered the page, holding it carefully by the corner. "Okay," he said softly. "I won't. No questions, no forced conversation. No, we should talk about this." It stunned her. She clamped the paper awkwardly between the edges of her prosthetics and folded it against her chest, her movements stiff and jerky. "You weren't supposed to see it," she said, her voice trembling. He nodded. "Then I didn't." A simple statement, a small mercy, a mercy more powerful than she expected. She turned away, focusing on her breathing, on slowing her racing pulse. The festival noise around them blurred, music, laughter, footsteps, all fading under the pressure of her embarrassment. Jonathan took a step back, giving her room. "If you want space, I can go," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to leave you struggling on the ground alone, that's all." Maya blinked. The words hit her harder than they should have. He wasn't staying because he felt obligated. He wasn't leaving because she made things awkward. He was simply offering presence on her terms. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "You're not what I expected." "Is that good or bad?" he asked, a wry smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. "I'm not sure yet," she muttered. He chuckled. "Fair enough." A group of artists passed by carrying paper lanterns decorated with watercolor patterns. One of them brushed against Maya accidentally, and her sketchbook slid again, but Jonathan moved instinctively, steadying it before it could fall. He didn't touch her. He touched the sketchbook, respecting the boundary she never said aloud. "You're very fast," she murmured. "Former paramedic," he said. "Old habits." Something shifted in her chest. That explained the calm voice, the steady hands, the instinctive gentleness. It also meant he'd seen injuries, trauma. Humans cracked open in the worst ways. Maybe that's why he wasn't startled by her. "You worked in emergencies?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, not from shame or secrecy, but from the heaviness of memory. "For 12 years," he answered. "Stopped 3 years ago." "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Jonathan looked toward the lighthouse, where the first spark of ignition glowed faintly. The wind caught his hair, and for a moment he looked older, worn in a way that wasn't physical. "Too many things I couldn't fix," he said simply. There was something in his tone, hollow, raw, that made Maya's chest ache. She understood that feeling too well. He cleared his throat, shifting gears. "The lighthouse is lighting in about 2 minutes," he said. "If you want to watch, I'll walk with you. If you'd rather be alone, I'll stay here until the crowd moves so you don't get bumped." That choice again, that impossible kindness that made her want to run. "I don't know," she admitted. "You don't have to decide," he said. "Just walk. I'll match your pace." So they walked, slowly, quietly, side by side, no pressure, no pity, no fear. The lanterns dimmed as the lighthouse flame flared to life, casting a golden beam across the ocean. The crowd murmured in awe, their silhouettes shimmering against the water. Maya's breath steadied. Her heart slowed. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a spectacle. She felt human. Beside her, Jonathan gazed at the lighthouse, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, eyes reflecting the glow like he'd seen 1,000 such lights and still found something sacred in them. Without looking at her, he asked quietly, "Is the drawing of who you were or who you think you've become?" Her entire body went still. He hadn't looked at the drawing, but he'd understood it anyway. A stranger shouldn't be able to read her so clearly, and yet he did. What will Maya tell him about the drawing? And what part of Jonathan's past will this question accidentally unlock? Maya didn't answer at first. The lighthouse beam swept over them, casting long shadows across the boardwalk and illuminating Jonathan's face in brief, gentle flashes. His question hung between them, quiet, patient, and unbearably honest. "Is the drawing of who you were or who you think you've become?" People didn't ask her things like that. People asked how she ate, how she showered, how she managed, how she coped. Clinical questions, surface questions, not questions about the world inside her chest. She swallowed hard. "Why would you ask that?" Jonathan shrugged lightly, but his eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Because people don't usually draw pain unless they're trying to understand it." Maya looked away. "Or escape it," he nodded. "That too." Silence. The comfortable kind and the terrifying kind intertwined. Maya's throat felt tight. "You shouldn't have seen that drawing. It wasn't meant for anyone." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I didn't look at it." But he had seen enough. Enough to guess the meaning, enough to see what she didn't want anyone to see. She took a slow breath, watching the lighthouse glow pulse like a heartbeat. "It's not who I was," she said finally. "It's who I felt like after." "After the accident?" he asked gently. Her stomach twisted. She had avoided discussing the details with anyone in town. She didn't want to be seen as the woman from the train crash, the one in newspapers and sympathy posts. But now the words edged closer to her lips, words she hadn't spoken aloud since leaving the rehabilitation center. "Yes," she whispered. "After." Jonathan didn't push. He didn't ask how or when or why. He simply let her choose how much to share. "I used to travel," she said, surprised by her own voice. "Illustrate local life, sketch strangers in cafes, children by fountains, old couples holding hands. My hands," she paused just long enough to feel the ache, "were my home, my identity." Jonathan's brow furrowed, not from pity but from a soft, human grief. "That's a brutal kind of loss." "Losing my arms?" she asked. "Losing the thing you built your life around," he replied. Something hitched in her chest. Everyone else focused on what she couldn't do. Not one person had ever acknowledged what she'd lost inside. She cleared her throat, her voice cracking. "I wasn't supposed to be on that train. Last-minute change. Wrong seat, wrong time. I remember the screech, the jolt, the metal twisting." She shuddered. "When I woke up, everything was gone." Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. "It wasn't even the pain," she continued, staring down at her prosthetics. "It was waking up and knowing I'd never touch paper the same way, never feel charcoal under my fingers, never hold a pencil and just draw." Her breath hitched. "I didn't know who I was without my hands." Jonathan slowly exhaled. "That's why the drawing looked the way it did." Her shoulders tensed. "You said you didn't see it." "I didn't," he said. "But I've seen that expression before." Before she could ask what he meant, he added quietly, "On myself." The words startled her. "What do you mean?" He watched the lighthouse beam sweep the sky again. "When I left my paramedic job, I drew something similar. Not a picture, but a note, just a sentence. I'm not sure there's anything left of me worth saving." Maya stared at him, stunned. "You wrote that?" He nodded. "On a night I couldn't sleep, after a call that broke something in me." She stepped closer before she realized it. "What happened?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. His face hardened, not in anger, but in the way someone braces themselves before opening an old wound. "A storm," he said at last. "A collapse, a rescue that should have ended differently." He rubbed his thumb along the inside of his palm. "I still hear the sound sometimes, the moment everything went wrong." Maya felt the air shift between them. A quiet recognition, a fragile thread connecting two damaged people. "Is that why you left?" she whispered. "That," he murmured, "and losing someone I loved because I couldn't reach them in time." Something inside Maya cracked open. "You lost someone?" she said softly. He nodded once, her voice gentled. "I'm sorry." He offered a faint smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "It's life, or what's left after." The lanterns flickered as a gust of ocean wind swept through the pier. People cheered as the lighthouse beam hit full brightness, but Maya barely heard them, because for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the most broken person in the conversation. Jonathan wasn't whole either. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't untouchable. He wasn't someone pitying her from solid ground. He was someone standing in his own wreckage, quietly holding pieces together. "Do you ever feel," she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer, "like you're just pretending to be okay?" Jonathan met her eyes. "Every night," he said. Two broken people finally see each other clearly. But what happens when the ghosts from Jonathan's past show up sooner than Maya expects? The festival had begun to thin out. Families drifted toward the parking lot. Couples strolled hand in hand, artists packed up their booths. But Maya and Jonathan remained by the railing overlooking Hawthorne Bay, a strange, fragile quiet settling between them. The lighthouse beam swept the shoreline in long, rhythmic strokes. Maya watched it trace the waves, each rotation steady and sure, unlike the trembling in her own chest. Jonathan leaned forward, his arms braced on the railing. He looked like a man suspended between two worlds, the one he lived in and the one he couldn't leave behind. "Can I ask something?" Maya said. He didn't look at her right away. "You can ask anything. You said you lost someone you loved. Was it recent?" Jonathan's fingers drummed once on the railing, then stopped. "Not recent," he said quietly, "but not far enough away." The answer was cryptic, but his tone made it clear this wasn't a door he was ready to open. And Maya didn't push. She understood enough about wounds that hadn't finished bleeding. They stood in silence until a burst of applause from the crowd signaled the official end of the lighthouse ceremony. Maya shifted awkwardly, unsure how to say goodbye, unsure if goodbye was even the right move. Jonathan straightened, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. "Do you live nearby?" he asked. A few blocks east of the marina, she replied. A rental cottage. His face lit with recognition. The row of cedar cottages, those are beautiful. She shrugged lightly, the motion stiff with her prosthetics. I chose it because it has lever-style door handles instead of round knobs, and the light switches are low, makes things easier. He nodded, not at the explanation, but at the subtle bravery embedded in it. Makes sense. Then something changed. He pulled out his phone and checked the time, habitual automatic until he froze. His expression flickered like a memory had just tapped him on the shoulder. You okay? Maya asked. Jonathan blinked, forcing a smile that didn't quite land. Yeah, I just forgot I'm on shift in an hour. Shift, she echoed. I host a late-night radio segment, he explained. It's nothing big, just stories, music, call-ins. Keeps me occupied when the insomnia won't quit. That startled her more than it should have. You're the Night Harbor voice? Jonathan raised an eyebrow. You know it. I listen almost every night, she admitted, cheeks warming. Your voice, she stumbled, embarrassed. It helps me sleep. Jonathan's smile softened into something warmer, something almost grateful. Then I'm glad it reaches someone. He started to turn, but froze mid-step. A faint sound buzzed from his phone, one he clearly recognized. His shoulders tensed. Maya tilted her head. Everything okay? He exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. Yeah, just the station. They're checking in. But the tightening in his jaw suggested otherwise. He hesitated, turning fully toward her again. Listen, I like talking with you, Maya, more than I expected to. She felt her stomach flutter. Me too. His eyes lingered on her quick, as if afraid of making her uncomfortable, but deep enough that she felt seen. Could we do this again? He asked. Not a date, just two people trying not to drown alone. Her throat tightened. I think I'd like that. Jonathan's smile grew, this time reaching his eyes. Good. He stepped back, offering a small wave. I'll see you around. Maya watched him walk toward the parking lot, his silhouette illuminated by lanterns and the lighthouse beam. He moved like someone carrying weight, quiet, patient, but undeniably heavy. The moment he disappeared behind a row of booths, Maya finally released the breath she'd been holding. She wasn't sure what scared her more. That she wanted to see him again, or that she already knew she would. Jonathan's truck door slammed shut. The moment he sat, his phone vibrated again, relentless this time. He answered sharply. Yeah, I'm here, he said into the receiver. What's the issue? A voice crackled on the other end. John, we tried calling 10 times. Emergency broadcast came in. Someone from your past keeps calling the station, says it's important. Jonathan's blood ran cold. My past, he whispered. Who? Static swallowed the response for half a second. Then the voice came through clearly. She said her name is Claire Hale. Jonathan's breath stopped. That name was dead, buried, impossible. Because Claire wasn't someone from his past. She was the woman he lost. His wife. Maya, still standing beneath the lighthouse glow, had no idea that Jonathan's world had just shifted under his feet. Why is someone using Jonathan's late wife's name? And what message are they trying so desperately to deliver? Jonathan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched. The name rattled inside his head, distorting everything around him. Claire Hale, his wife, gone 3 years. Buried on a hillside overlooking the same ocean that now shimmered outside his windshield. Did you say Claire? Jonathan forced out, his voice rough. The station manager exhaled shakily. I know how it sounds, John. But she keeps calling. Same name, same urgency, says she knows you, says you'll want to hear what she has to say. Jonathan's pulse hammered. You didn't give her my number? Of course not, but she left a message. A pause. I think you should come in. Jonathan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He ended the call without responding and leaned back, letting the silence swallow him. It was impossible, a prank, a coincidence. But the tremor in his hand said otherwise. He closed his eyes, letting memories barrel through him. The warm scent of Claire's hair, her laugh echoing in their old kitchen, the way she'd whisper volunteer saves lives, John, not miracles whenever he pushed too hard. And then the final memory, her trapped under a collapsed beam, dust thick in the air, her voice weak, saying his name one last time. He hadn't reached her in time. He never forgave himself. He never would. A knock on the driver's side window jolted him. He jerked upright, wiping the grief from his face before it could show. A teenage vendor in a festival apron stood there timidly, holding a tray of unsold pastries. Sir, we're giving out leftovers before we close. Want a cinnamon roll? Jonathan blinked. No thanks. The teen nodded and walked away. Jonathan watched him go, grounding himself in the normalcy of it. Not everything was a ghost. He turned the ignition and drove toward the station. Meanwhile, Maya lingered under the lighthouse glow far longer than she intended. She should have gone straight home. She needed to practice using her new adaptive stylus. She needed to finish answering Patricia's emails about the therapy schedule. Instead, she stood there replaying the evening. Jonathan's smile, his steady voice. The way he didn't look at her prosthetics with discomfort or fascination, just acceptance. She wrapped her mechanical arms around her sketchbook like a shield and finally began the walk home. Hawthorne Bay was quiet at night. Too quiet. Every footstep echoed off the boardwalk, and every gust of wind whistled through her memory. Her cottage came into view, the middle one of the cedar row, the one with the porch light always left on to help her navigate the keyless entry pad. She punched in the code with the edge of her prosthetic's wrist joint. The door clicked open. Inside, dim lamps flickered on automatically as her voice-activated system responded. "Lights to low," she said. Warm amber light filled the cozy living room. Blankets folded neatly, sketches scattered on the table, adaptive tools lined up on a shelf. A safe space. A space she built from shattered pieces. She set the sketchbook down and lowered onto the couch, exhaustion finally creeping in. Her prosthetic arms hummed faintly as they powered down from active mode. But her mind didn't quiet. Jonathan's voice echoed in her memory, "Too many things I couldn't fix. Losing someone I loved. Every night I pretend I'm okay." She pressed her forehead against the backrest, trying to steady herself. She'd met plenty of people who stared at her with pity, but Jonathan wasn't like them. His brokenness didn't push him away from her, it somehow drew him closer. And that terrified her, because hope was dangerous. Hope meant she could lose something again. Her breath hitched. The cottage suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. She whispered to herself, "Don't get attached, don't be stupid." But even as she said it, she knew the truth she already was. At the radio station, Jonathan paced the small studio, avoiding the blinking voicemail light like it was a bomb. The intern on duty watched him nervously. "It's just a message, Jonathan." "You don't understand," Jonathan muttered. He finally pressed play, a burst of static, a crackling hiss, then a voice, soft, broken, urgent. "Jonathan, if you're hearing this, please, I need to talk to you." He froze, his pulse stopped, his breath stopped, time stopped. Because the voice, it sounded like Claire. Not exactly, not perfectly. Older maybe, rougher, but the cadence, the way she said his name, it hit him like a blow. The message continued. "There's something you never knew about about that night. Something I should have told you. Please, don't hang up, call me back." The line ended abruptly with static. Jonathan staggered back, gripping the edge of the desk. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever it was, they knew too much. He stared at his trembling hands. If Claire's ghost hadn't returned, then someone who knew the truth had. Someone who had been there that night. Someone who had kept a secret buried for 3 years. And Maya had stepped into his life just as the past clawed its way back. Jonathan whispered into the empty studio. "What did you never tell me, Claire?" The voice from Jonathan's past has resurfaced. But what truth is it hiding? And how long until this secret collides with Maya's fragile new beginning? Jonathan couldn't sit, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the echo of that voice, familiar enough to twist a knife, different enough to feel like a haunting. He replayed the message again. Static, a crackle, then that voice. "Jonathan, if you're hearing this, please, I need to talk to you." Every syllable felt stitched from the past. Every breath carried pieces of memories he'd buried. The intern hovered near the door, unsure whether to stay or pretend not to notice. Should I give you space?" he asked softly. Jonathan nodded, gripping the console edge. "Yeah, lock the front door on your way out." When the door clicked shut, Jonathan dropped into the chair and buried his face in his hands. His chest felt hollow, scraped raw from inside. He whispered into the empty room, "Why now, Claire? Why after all this time?" But there was no answer, just the hum of studio equipment and the low thrum of the ocean outside. He had a show to host in 15 minutes, yet he felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff with no railing. Across town, Maya sat curled on the couch, the soft hum of her prosthetics finally quieting as they settled into rest mode. She picked up the remote using her forearm brace, navigating to the radio app on her TV. "Night Harbor Voice," she murmured, Jonathan's show, her nightly companion long before she met him. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the evening pressing on her chest. Meeting him in person had changed something, given the voice she found comforting a face, a story, a sadness. Her finger hovered over the play button. What if listening to him now made her want something she wasn't ready for? What if knowing him, really knowing him, meant she couldn't hide behind her careful walls? She exhaled shakily. "Just one episode," she told herself. She clicked play, static, a soft thump, Jonathan adjusting the microphone, then his voice filled the room. "Good evening, Hawthorne Bay." Maya's shoulders relaxed instinctively. His voice always did that, smoothed the edges of her nerves, grounded her in a way nothing else could. But tonight, something was off. His tone was lower, strained, like someone holding a fragile world together by sheer force of will. Tonight's broadcast will be a little different, Jonathan continued. No theme, no special guest, just stories and maybe some silence where I can't find the right words. Maya frowned. Jonathan never sounded like this, not on air. Not in the late hours when he kept the lonely company. He took a breath. If you're awake right now, maybe it's because you're carrying something heavy, something you can't name yet. If so, you're not alone tonight. Her chest tightened. He was speaking like a man shaken, a man who'd received a blow the world couldn't see. Maya leaned closer to the speakers. She wasn't sure why, but she whispered, "What happened to you tonight, Jonathan?" In the studio, Jonathan tried to breathe steadily, but the air felt thin. Words felt foreign on his tongue. He shuffled through the story cards, but none made sense. He tossed them aside, letting them scatter across the desk. His voice dropped to a murmur meant only for the sleepless. "Some nights," he said, "the past doesn't stay where it belongs." Maya straightened immediately. Jonathan continued. "Sometimes you think you've buried something deep enough, far enough. But then a single sound, a single name pulls it back to the surface." Maya's heart pounded. He wasn't reading a script. He was bleeding. Jonathan inhaled sharply. "And on those nights, you have two choices, run from it or face it. Even if you're not ready." Maya felt a familiar ache, the one that lived inside her since the accident. The ache of being seen, even if unintentionally. Jonathan's voice trembled almost imperceptibly. "So if you're out there listening, and you've ever wished for just one moment of peace, this hour is for you." A soft piano track faded in, melancholy, slow, reflective. Maya pressed a hand to her chest. He sounded like someone standing on a fault line, waiting for the next crack. She wanted, against all reason, to be near him, to ask if he was okay, to tell him she understood nights like this too well. But they barely knew each other. She had no place in his crisis. Still, the instinct to reach out burned inside her. Maybe he needed someone who understood brokenness, someone who knew the language of pain. Maybe she needed that too. She stared at the radio screen for a long moment before whispering, "Jonathan, what happened to you tonight?" But Jonathan wasn't alone in his turmoil, because while he spoke into the microphone, his phone buzzed again. A number with no name attached, a voicemail notification blinking. He pressed play, the same voice, the same impossible voice. "Jonathan, I'm sorry, please call back. It's about the night of the collapse. I didn't tell you everything." Jonathan's blood went cold. This wasn't coincidence. Someone knew something about Claire's death, something they never revealed, something that could break him all over again. What secret about the collapse is this mysterious caller hiding? And how will Jonathan's unraveling affect Maya, who is unknowingly listening to every crack in his voice? Jonathan didn't sleep after the broadcast. He didn't even try. He sat alone in the dark studio long after the station closed, listening to the ocean wind whip against the windows, listening to the voicemail over and over until the words burrowed under his skin. "The night of the collapse. I didn't tell you everything. Please call back." Every time he heard the voice, so close to Claire's, his chest tightened until he felt like breaking. He didn't call back, couldn't, not yet. At dawn, with exhaustion grinding into his bones, Jonathan finally drove home. His house sat on the quiet end of Hawthorne Bay, where the trees leaned low and the porch steps creaked in familiar protest. A soft yellow glow seeped from inside. He winced. Liam was awake early. He entered quietly, but his son was already sitting on the living room rug, building a crooked tower of magnetic blocks. The boy looked up with bright, tired eyes, eyes too observant for his age. "You didn't sleep again," Liam said matter-of-factly. Jonathan dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. "I had a late show." "You always say that," Liam tilted his head. "But this time you look like extra tired, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep." Jonathan blinked. Children didn't tiptoe around pain. They didn't hint, they pointed. He forced a smile. "Rough night, nothing for you to worry about." Liam squinted at him, unconvinced. "Daddy, is it about Mom?" Jonathan froze. His heart thudded painfully. Liam rarely mentioned Claire, not out of fear, but out of the gentle instinct children have to avoid reopening their parents' wounds. Jonathan knelt beside him. "Why do you ask?" "Because," Liam whispered, leaning in, "you got that sad voice. The one you get on the day we visit her stone." Jonathan closed his eyes. He didn't want to lie. He didn't want to burden his son either. "Someone," Jonathan chose his words carefully, "said something that reminded me of her." "Do you miss her more today?" Liam asked softly. "Some days I miss her like my chest is empty," Jonathan whispered. Liam crawled into his lap without hesitation. Jonathan wrapped his arms around him, the familiar warmth grounding him in a way nothing else could. "Daddy," Liam murmured against his shirt, "if someone makes you sad like this, you don't have to talk to them." Jonathan swallowed hard. If only it were that simple. A few blocks away, Maya stood in front of a mirror, trying for the sixth time to fasten the back strap of her adaptive dress with her prosthetic arms. Every attempt ended the same, slipping, fumbling, failing. She huffed in frustration. Why did I even buy this stupid thing? She wasn't going anywhere special. She wasn't meeting anyone. And yet she'd woken up with a strange, restless desire to try. Maybe because last night had shaken something loose. Maybe because Jonathan's voice had cracked in a way that felt too familiar. She pulled the dress off, swapped it for a loose sweater she could manage alone, and headed to the kitchen. Her phone buzzed. Patricia's message lit the screen. "Morning, love. I can swing by later if you need help. Let me know." Maya smiled faintly. Patricia was as close to family as she had left. She typed back with her mouth stylus, "All good today, just practicing clothes, thanks." But the lie sat heavy. She didn't feel all good. She felt shaken, unsettled, too aware of a man she barely knew. After last night's broadcast, she'd paced her cottage for almost an hour, torn between wanting to reach out and reminding herself she had no right. He wasn't hers to comfort. She wasn't his person. Still, his voice had sounded like a man standing in a burning room with nowhere to go. She couldn't forget that. At mid-morning, Jonathan finally forced himself back into routine. He made breakfast with Liam, burned the toast twice, then walked his son halfway to school. But as they neared the corner, Liam slowed. "Daddy?" "Yes." The boy chewed his lip. "Is this about that message on your work phone?" Jonathan's blood chilled. "How did you know about that?" "You left your phone on the counter last night," Liam admitted. "It kept blinking. I didn't listen. I just saw the name on the screen." Jonathan's breath froze. "What name did you see?" Liam looked up, earnest and confused. "It said Claire." Jonathan's vision blurred for a moment. "No. No, no, no," Liam continued in a small voice. "Daddy, why is Mom calling you if she's gone?" Jonathan dropped to one knee, steadying himself with a hand on the grass. His son's eyes were wide, full of the innocent terror that only comes when a child thinks the world has stopped making sense. Jonathan swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's not her," he whispered. "Someone is pretending or confused. Or something else." "Something else," Liam whispered, voice trembling. Jonathan forced gentleness into his tone. "Hey, look at me." Liam looked. "Your mom is gone," Jonathan said softly. "She's not calling. I promise you that." Liam's lower lip quivered. "But the name—" "I know," Jonathan murmured, pulling him close. "And I'm going to figure out why, but you don't need to worry." "Okay," Liam nodded shakily, burying his face in Jonathan's shoulder. Jonathan held him until the tremble eased. He hated this. Hated that his pain had spilled into his son's world. Hated that a voice from the past had enough power to rattle the present. When he finally sent Liam off toward the schoolyard, Jonathan stood there for a long moment, wind tugging at his jacket. He hated even more that part of him wanted, needed, to talk to someone about this. And the only person he could imagine telling was the woman who listened to him in the dark. Jonathan needs someone to confide in. But will Maya let him close when she's still terrified of letting anyone see her struggle up close? Jonathan stood on the school sidewalk long after Liam disappeared through the gates, watching the boy's small backpack vanish into the crowd. The wind off the ocean chilled his skin, but the cold wasn't what made him shiver. It was the name, the voice, the impossible message, Claire. He dragged a hand down his face and forced himself to breathe. His son was scared. He was unraveling. Someone had to stay steady, so he walked slowly, deliberately toward the marina. He didn't know where else to go. He didn't want to go home, where every room held echoes of the past. He didn't want to go back to the station, where the voicemail light blinked like a taunt. Instead, his feet brought him to the one place in town that felt neutral. Quiet, even, safe, the boardwalk where he'd met her. Maya, he hadn't expected to think of her, he barely knew her. But when he did think of her, he felt the faintest shift inside. A steadiness he hadn't felt in years. He found himself hoping, irrationally, that she might be there again. At the same moment, Maya stared down at her front door, debating whether to cancel the entire day. She wasn't scheduled for therapy. She didn't have work calls. She could stay in. No one would care. But the cottage felt suffocating, like walls were folding in, and her thoughts kept circling back to Jonathan's voice from the night before, trembling, unfamiliar, almost pleading. She hated how much it affected her. She hated how badly she wanted to see him. She exhaled sharply. "You're being ridiculous." Still, she grabbed her bag with the adaptive straps, slid it carefully over her shoulder, and stepped out. Her plan was simple. Walk to the marina, sit on her favorite bench, sketch the shorebirds with her mouth stylus, and forget she'd ever been foolish enough to want connection. By the time she reached the boardwalk, the breeze had picked up. Fishing boats rumbled from their docks. Seagulls cried overhead. Early tourists snapped photos of the lighthouse. Normal things, things she could hide inside until she saw him. Jonathan, hands in pockets, face drawn, gaze distant. Her heart skipped so hard she nearly stopped walking. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not this early. Not after a night like last night. But maybe, just maybe, some part of him had wandered here for the same reason she had. She could walk past him, pretend she didn't see him, protect herself. But Jonathan looked up right then, eyes meeting hers with a mixture of hesitation and relief, and her decision was made for her. He approached slowly like he didn't want to startle her. "Maya, hey," her breath caught. "Hi, you're up early." "So are you," she replied, a ghost of a smile flickered across his face. "Didn't sleep," she hesitated. "Your show last night, you sounded off," he finished. She nodded cautiously. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Something happened, something I wasn't expecting." Maya's chest tightened. She shouldn't ask. They weren't close enough. She wasn't allowed to care this much, but the words slipped out anyway. "Are you okay?" Jonathan's eyes softened, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "I don't know." The honesty struck her like a physical thing. She shifted her weight. "Do you want to sit?" He nodded, and they walked to the edge of the pier. Maya lowered herself carefully onto the bench, her prosthetics adjusting with a soft, mechanical whir. Jonathan sat beside her, not too close, not far either. Just right, the ocean spread before them, endless and shimmering. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Jonathan exhaled. "I don't want to dump things on you," Maya frowned. "You're not dumping, you're talking." He huffed a small laugh. "Is there a difference?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Dumping is when you assume someone can hold your weight without asking. Talking is when you give them the choice." Jonathan looked at her then, really looked. "And you're choosing to listen," Maya swallowed. "I guess I am." His shoulders sagged, releasing a tension she hadn't realized he was carrying. "Someone called the station last night." "Okay," she said softly. "They used Claire's name." Maya froze. He continued, voice low and trembling. "And the worst part is they sounded like her." Maya's breath hitched. "Jonathan, they said they knew something about the night she died." His fingers clenched into fists. "Something they never told me." Maya felt her heart break for him, quietly, deeply. Jonathan laughed bitterly. "I must look like a complete mess right now." "You look human," she said. "That's allowed." He stared at her, stunned by the gentleness in her tone. "Why is it so easy to talk to you?" Maya's chest tightened. She didn't know the answer, maybe because he didn't stare at her like she was a tragedy, maybe because his pain echoed hers, maybe because broken people recognized each other. "I don't know," she whispered. The wind picked up, brushing her hair across her face. Jonathan reached out instinctively to help, then paused halfway, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded once. He gently pushed her hair behind her ear. She felt warmth bloom under her skin. Jonathan swallowed hard. "Thank you for being here," she nodded. "You don't have to go through it alone." His gaze lingered on her for a beat too long, and then quietly, vulnerably, he asked, "Can I see you again later? Today, I mean?" Maya's breath caught. He wanted to see her, not tolerate her, not pity her, seek her out. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'd like that." Jonathan exhaled, relief loosening the lines in his forehead. For the first time since the message, he didn't feel like the world was collapsing. Because someone had finally caught a piece of the falling debris. But as Maya grows closer to Jonathan, an unexpected complication is about to arrive. One that will force her to confront the very fears she's been running from. Maya walked home from the marina with a strange lightness in her chest, the kind she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The climb toward the cliff overlook was steeper than Maya remembered. Rough stone, uneven dirt, sharp switchbacks, the kind of path she usually avoided. Her prosthetic legs felt each shift in the terrain. Her balance required constant micro-adjustments. The motors in her arms whirred softly as she used the railings and rocks for support. But she didn't stop. Liam walked beside her, small breaths puffing in the cold air, eyes fixed ahead with a determination far too heavy for a child. Every few steps he glanced up at her as if worried she might falter. "I'm okay," she assured him, even when her knees trembled. "We're close," Liam whispered. "Dad always parks his truck by the second bend." Sure enough, when they reached the clearing, Jonathan's pickup sat crooked at the trail's edge, the driver's door half open, keys dangling from the ignition. Maya's stomach tightened. He had left in a hurry. Liam clutched her sleeve brace. "He's here." The wind picked up, scattering dry leaves across the ground. The cliff overlook was only a short walk away, a wooden fence separating hikers from the sheer drop to the ocean below. Waves roared against the rocks, sending mist into the air. Maya followed the curve of the trail until she saw him. Jonathan, standing at the edge of the cliff, hands braced on the railing, head bowed. He wasn't crying, he wasn't collapsing, but he looked like a man holding on only because gravity hadn't made the final decision yet. The sight of him hit her chest like a blow. Liam inhaled sharply. "Dad!" Maya placed a gentle arm across his shoulders. "Wait," she whispered. "Let me go first." The boy nodded, eyes wide and frightened. Maya approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the gravel. "Jonathan," she said quietly. He stiffened but didn't turn. For a moment she thought he might not speak at all. Then in a hoarse whisper, "How did you find me?" "Liam came to me," she said. His head jerked slightly at his son's name. "He was worried," she added. "So am I," Jonathan exhaled, shaky, uneven. "I didn't want him to see me like this." "He's not seeing you like anything," Maya said gently. "He sees his dad. The person he loves most." Jonathan finally turned his head slightly, enough for her to see the grief carved into his features. "You shouldn't have come," he murmured. "This isn't your burden." Maya stepped closer, standing beside him at the railing. "Jonathan, people aren't burdens. Grief isn't a burden. Being human isn't a burden." His eyes flickered with something, disbelief maybe, or guilt. "I keep hearing her voice," he whispered. "It's impossible, but it's her. Or someone who wants me to think it's her." His hands tightened on the railing. "I don't know which is worse," Maya swallowed. "Do you want to tell me what happened that night, what you're afraid this person knows?" Jonathan shut his eyes. For a long moment there was only the wind. Then, "The collapse wasn't instant," he said. "People think it was. They think everyone inside died immediately." His jaw clenched. "But Claire didn't." Maya held her breath. "She was alive when I reached her, trapped but alive. She told me she could hear someone deeper inside calling for help." His voice cracked. "She made me go after them. She begged me to. She said she'd hold on." A single tear slipped down his cheek. "I listened, I left her, I found the other victim, but by the time we got back," his voice broke completely. "She was gone." Silence fell, heavy, leaving no room for air. Maya's heart twisted painfully. She had never heard grief spoken so plainly, so nakedly, so devastatingly. "You did what she asked," Maya whispered. "She made you choose. It wasn't your fault." "But what if it was?" Jonathan whispered back. "What if she wasn't alone? What if the person in that voicemail was there that night and saw something I didn't?" Maya's breath hitched. "You think someone else was with her?" "I don't know." He dragged a trembling hand through his hair. "But the message said she didn't tell me everything, that there was something I never knew." Maya stepped closer, cautiously but deliberately. Her prosthetic fingertips brushed the back of his hand, light, steady. He looked down at her touch like it startled him. "You're not alone," she said softly. "Not in this. Not now." Jonathan's face crumpled, just slightly, just enough to show how desperately he needed to hear those words. Behind them, Liam finally approached with hesitant steps. "Dad," he whispered. Jonathan turned, shocked. In an instant, the grief in his face melted into panic. "Liam, no, no, why aren't you in school?" The boy rushed to him, throwing his arms around his father's waist. "I was scared you'd leave." Jonathan knelt, pulling him close, voice trembling. "I would never leave you, never." Maya looked away, giving them space, but her chest ached at the tenderness between them, raw, real, unfiltered. Jonathan held his son until Liam's breathing steadied, then glanced up at Maya. "Thank you," he said, voice thick, "for bringing him, for everything." She nodded, her heart beating harder than she wanted to admit. As the wind howled through the cliffs, Jonathan stood, one hand gripping Liam's, the other still lightly touching the railing. "We should go," he murmured, "before this gets worse." Maya stepped back to give him room. But deep in her chest, a new fear stirred, because the cliff hadn't been the real danger. The real danger was the secret behind the voice claiming to know the truth about Claire's last moments, a truth that might break Jonathan yet again. Just when Maya thinks Jonathan is safe, an unexpected message is about to arrive, one addressed not to him, but to her. The walk back from the cliff was quieter than the climb up, quieter but heavier. Jonathan held Liam's hand tightly, as if letting go even for a second might tempt fate to take something else from him. Maya walked on his other side, careful on the uneven ground, each step slow and deliberate. Her prosthetics clicked softly with each shift of weight. No one spoke. The wind had calmed, but inside Maya's chest a storm churned. She had never seen someone unravel that gently, so silently. Jonathan didn't rage, he didn't shout, he didn't blame. He simply broke inward and the pieces fell too quietly for the world to hear. And yet she had heard them. By the time they reached the flat stretch of road near the lighthouse, Liam's hand slipped from his father's grip, and the boy tugged at Jonathan's shirt. "Can we go home now?" Liam whispered. Jonathan knelt, brushing the boy's hair back. "Yeah, we're going home." Liam looked relieved, but still uncertain. "And you won't leave again? Not without saying goodbye first." Jonathan pressed a kiss to his son's forehead. "You're my anchor, kid." Maya looked away, giving them privacy. Her eyes drifted toward the ocean, sparkling under the afternoon sun. It looked peaceful, deceivingly so. Waves hid their violence well, she knew that firsthand. When she turned back, Jonathan was standing again. This time he looked at Maya, really looked. "I don't know what would have happened if you didn't come," he admitted quietly. Maya shook her head. "You weren't going to do anything reckless." His silence said otherwise. "You weren't," she repeated, firmer this time. Jonathan's jaw shifted, a small muscle tightening. "I wasn't thinking clearly. That's enough danger on its own." The raw honesty in his voice startled her. People usually hid their darkest moments. He didn't, not with her. "Walk with us," he asked. "At least until the parking lot." She nodded automatically, maybe too quickly, but she didn't care. If he needed her near, she would stay near. They reached the path where Jonathan's truck was parked, and Maya slowed. She wasn't sure if she should stay, leave, or say something comforting, something normal. But before any words formed, Jonathan suddenly reached out and touched her elbow gently. A careful gesture, mindful of her prosthetics. "Maya," he said quietly. "Yes," his voice softened. "Thank you for coming up there. You didn't have to." "I know," she whispered. "But I wanted to." He didn't smile. He just looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Something fragile, something grateful, something almost frightened. As if caring for someone again scared him. As if letting someone care even more so. Liam tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, I'm hungry." Jonathan blinked and exhaled. "Right, let's get you food." He opened the truck door and helped Liam climb in. Maya stepped back, preparing to say goodbye. Then Jonathan hesitated, one hand on the door. "Will you be okay getting home?" he asked. She nodded. "Of course." Another pause, his eyes flickered with something unspoken. "I'll call you," he said, her heart tripped, stumbling in her chest. "Okay." He shut the door and circled to the driver's side. As he started the engine, Maya lifted a hand in a small wave. Jonathan didn't leave immediately. Instead, he lowered the window. "Maya." She stepped closer. He held her gaze. "Whatever this turns into, whatever comes next, I don't want you to disappear, not now." Her breath stilled. "I won't." He nodded once deeply, as if the promise mattered far more than she understood. Then he drove away. Maya watched the truck disappear down the highway, the dust settling slowly behind it. Something new, delicate, and terrifying was blooming inside her. She had no idea what to do with it. When she got home, she kicked off her shoes by the door, set her bag down, and sank onto the couch. Her mind replayed every detail of the cliff, Jonathan's face, his shaking hands, the heartbreaking way he said Claire's name. She'd promised not to disappear, but promises were easy, keeping them was harder. She leaned forward, rubbing her temple. "You're getting in too deep," she whispered to herself. "Too fast." Her phone buzzed on the table. She froze. Jonathan. She picked it up using her prosthetics pincer attachment and looked at the screen. Unknown number, new voicemail. Her heartbeat stumbled. Her thumb hovered. No one left voicemails anymore, not unless it mattered. She tapped play. Static, a long, empty breath. Then a voice, a woman's voice, fragile, broken, almost trembling. "Maya, you don't know me, but I know you." Maya's pulse spiked. "I know what happened to you. I know about the train. I know what you lost." Her breath caught sharply, panic flooding her veins. "It wasn't an accident," the voice whispered, "and you're not as safe as you think." The voicemail ended abruptly. Maya's phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. Her entire body went cold. This message, this threat, it wasn't meant for Jonathan. It was meant for her. Who is the mysterious caller who knows both Jonathan's past and Maya's? And why are they warning her now, just as she lets someone back into her life? Maya sat frozen on the couch, staring at the phone on the floor as if it were a venomous thing that had crawled into her home. The woman's voice still echoed in her skull, soft, trembling, intimate in the most disturbing way. "Maya, you don't know me, but I know you. I know what you lost. It wasn't an accident. You're not as safe as you think." Her breath came in short, staccato bursts. Her prosthetic fingers twitched, an involuntary tremor she hadn't felt in months. Someone out there knew her, someone who shouldn't, someone who was watching. Her chest tightened painfully, and for a moment she couldn't tell if she was suffocating or panicking, or both. "No," she whispered, forcing herself to reach for the phone. "No, no, no." With effort, she picked it up and replayed the message. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to be sure she hadn't imagined it. Static, breath. Maya, she stopped it instantly, thumb trembling. This wasn't imagined. This wasn't a wrong number. This wasn't coincidence. Her first instinct was to call Patricia. Her second was to call the police. Her third, a trembling, foolish thought, was to call Jonathan. But none of those choices felt safe. If she called Jonathan now, when his world was already cracking open, she would drag him deeper into something dark, something that suddenly felt too much like a storm gathering on both their horizons. She pressed her palms, cold metal, against her forehead. Think, she breathed. Just think. But thinking was impossible when every shadow in the cottage felt alive, when every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps, when every whisper of wind against the window felt like someone exhaling her name. She forced herself up and stumbled toward the kitchen sink, splashing cold water on her face. The shock steadied her for a moment. Her reflection in the window looked foreign, pale skin, wide eyes, trembling lips. "Maya," she whispered, gripping the counter, "who would do this? Who even knows where I am?" Only a handful of people from her old life knew she moved here. The hospital, her therapist, Patricia. A few distant acquaintances, but none of them would do this. None, unless her stomach dropped, unless this wasn't about her at all, unless it was about Jonathan, unless someone was deliberately reaching for both of them. Her heart thudded painfully. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, pacing back and forth, unsure whether to leave, stay, run, or call for help. But before she could decide, her phone buzzed again. A text. Unknown number, her breath seized. "Check your front porch." Maya's blood ran cold. She didn't want to look. She didn't want to move. She didn't want to know what waited outside. But she forced herself forward, slow, deliberate steps, until she reached the window beside the front door. She pressed her forehead to the glass, dread swelling in her chest. A small white envelope lay on the porch. No name, no address. Just a single symbol drawn on the front, a circle with a line through it. Her prosthetics trembled so hard she had to steady herself on the table. She remembered that symbol. She hadn't seen it since the accident. It had been painted on the side of one of the derailed train cars. A marking investigators never explained. A marking she never understood, until now. She unlocked the door with shaking arms and stepped outside. The wind whipped at her sweater, but she barely noticed. She bent, slow, careful, and picked up the envelope using the side grip of her prosthetic. It was heavier than she expected. Inside was a single object, a USB drive and a note. "Don't trust him, don't trust anyone. The truth is bigger than both of you." Maya stumbled backward, dropping the note to the porch. The world blurred for a moment, her vision swimming, her breath sharp and thin. She clutched the railing and whispered, "Why me? Why now?" Because this felt deliberate, calculated, cruel. And whoever sent it knew she couldn't open the USB drive alone. She needed adaptive tools she didn't have in her cottage. There was only one place in town with the software and access she needed: Jonathan's radio station. Her throat tightened. She didn't want to drag him into this, not when he was reeling from the message about Claire, not when he could barely breathe under the weight of his own ghosts. But the envelope in her hand felt like a fuse ticking down. She looked toward the road leading to town. If this was connected to the collapse that killed Claire, if this was connected to the accident that took her arms, then she wasn't just accidental collateral. She was part of something neither of them understood. Her fingers curled around the USB drive. "I need to know," she whispered. But as she stepped inside to grab her bag, she didn't realize a figure stood half-hidden across the street, watching her cottage with unnerving stillness. And when she closed the door, the figure slipped back into the shadows. Maya is heading toward the one man she shouldn't involve, but the truth on that USB may link both their tragedies. And someone in Hawthorne Bay is watching every step she takes. Maya walked toward the radio station with the USB clutched tightly in her metal grip. The sky was darkening earlier than usual, heavy clouds rolling in, as if the weather itself sensed the storm brewing inside her. The message kept circling in her mind like a haunting refrain: "Don't trust him. The truth is bigger than both of you." Every part of her wanted to turn back, to hide, to forget the envelope and the voice and the fear climbing into her throat. But she couldn't, not anymore. If someone knew the truth about her accident and about the collapse that killed Claire, then she wasn't just a victim of bad luck. She was part of something larger, something darker, something that bound her and Jonathan together in ways neither understood. Her prosthetic legs clinked softly against the pavement as she reached the station door. She hesitated, her heart pounding hard enough to hurt. Then she knocked. The door opened almost instantly. Jonathan stood behind it, disheveled, exhausted, eyes swollen with unshed grief. But when he saw her, something like relief washed over his entire face. "Maya," he breathed. "Thank God." He stepped aside to let her in. She didn't miss the way his hands trembled. Nor did she miss how he looked at her like her presence alone anchored him to the ground. But she couldn't return the gentleness. Not yet. They stepped into the dim studio, monitors humming, the faint smell of old coffee lingering in the air. Liam wasn't there, thankfully. Jonathan must have dropped him with a neighbor. Jonathan shut the door behind her. I was about to call you. I could feel something was wrong, she exhaled shakily. Something is wrong, he frowned, stepping closer. Tell me. Her hands tightened around the USB until her joints whirred from the pressure. I got a voicemail today. From the same person who called you. Jonathan froze. Maya continued, voice trembling, but this one wasn't about Claire. It was about me, my accident, the train. They said it wasn't an accident. They left a symbol from the crash on my porch. Jonathan's breath hitched. What? She pulled out the envelope, the USB, and the note. Jonathan stared at them, his face draining of color. Maya, he whispered, this symbol, this was on the debris the night Claire. He stopped himself, voice cracking. I remember it. I remember thinking it didn't belong there. Her throat tightened. I think our tragedies are connected. The words hung in the air like electricity. Jonathan took the USB from her hand, gently, carefully, as if it were something sacred. We'll open it together. He sat at the studio computer, inserting the drive. Maya stayed behind him, fear twisting inside her until she felt physically sick. A single video file appeared on the screen. Jonathan clicked play. The screen filled with darkness. Then a shaky flashlight beam illuminated what looked like a wreckage tunnel, collapsed steel, dust, a trapped space. Maya gasped. Jonathan went still. A woman's voice whispered from behind the camera. Maya, Jonathan, if you're watching this, I need you to listen. Maya's knees nearly buckled. The voice, the same voice from both voicemails, but stronger now, clearer, more certain. I was there, the woman continued. The night of Jonathan's collapse, and 3 months later at the derailment that took Maya's arms. Maya felt the room tilt. Jonathan's fingers tightened around the mouse. Who are you? He whispered under his breath. The woman on the video spoke again, breath shaky. I'm Claire's sister. My name is Elise. Maya's eyes widened. Jonathan staggered back in his chair. No, he whispered. No, Claire didn't have siblings. She told me. She lied, Elise said. To protect you, to protect herself, and to protect a secret she shouldn't have carried alone. Maya pressed a hand to her chest. Jonathan gripped the table so hard it groaned. Elise continued. The night of the building collapse, Claire wasn't trapped alone. I was there with her. We were both volunteering that night. She kept me hidden behind the wreckage because she knew if rescuers tried to pull me out first, she wouldn't make it. Jonathan inhaled sharply, painfully. She didn't tell you everything because she knew you'd try to save us both, and if you did, you would have died too. Jonathan's vision blurred. Maya stepped closer instinctively. You didn't fail her, Jonathan, Elise's voice whispered. She made a choice, a cruel one, a loving one, a final one. She chose to save you. Jonathan bowed his head, shoulders shaking. Maya touched his back lightly. Elise's voice shifted, filled with something colder now. But after Claire died, I discovered something else. The collapse wasn't an accident, and neither was Maya's train crash. They were part of the same structural sabotage, done by the same company trying to cover up their safety violations. Maya's breath left her lungs. Jonathan stared at the screen in disbelief. Elise continued. You were both caught in the crossfire. Claire knew pieces of it, enough to make her a threat. I think she was silenced. And someone tried to do the same to Maya. Jonathan's jaw clenched, fury burning through his grief. Maya whispered, Why tell us now? The camera shook, Elise's voice trembling. Because I'm about to disappear. And everything I have, evidence, documents, names, is hidden in a storage locker under your names. You and Jonathan must go together, trust each other, or the truth dies with me. The video ended. Silence swallowed the room. Maya's heartbeat roared in her ears. Jonathan's breath trembled, broken and uneven. They stared at each other, both shattered, both terrified, both carrying truths they never asked for. Maya spoke first, voice trembling but steady. You didn't really lose her because you failed. You lost her because she chose to save you. Jonathan's lips parted, but no sound came. Tears filled his eyes, real tears, uncontrollable, human. And I didn't lose my arms because I was unlucky, she whispered. I lost them because someone tried to silence me. Jonathan took a step toward her, slow, uncertain, as if approaching something fragile. Maya, he breathed, voice breaking, I am so sorry for everything they took from you. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry you carried guilt that wasn't yours. Jonathan's hands shook as he reached up, hesitantly toward her face. He didn't touch her, not at first. He just hovered there, waiting. Maya leaned in, letting his palm rest against her cheek. Metal and skin, loss and healing. Two broken paths finally crossing, he exhaled as if releasing years of agony. She saved me, he whispered, and now you're helping me live. Maya's eyes filled with tears, and you're helping me feel human again. Jonathan stepped closer, his forehead touching hers, not a kiss, not yet, but a connection raw and real. She doesn't want us to be alone, Maya whispered. Not anymore. Jonathan nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Then we won't be. He wrapped his arms around her, and Maya let herself melt into him, her metal arms pressing gently against his back, her heart beating against his chest. Two tragedies, two survivors, two lives stitched together by pain, and now, finally, by hope. For the first time in years, the weight they carried didn't feel unbearable, not together. The truth hadn't broken them. It had brought them to each other.